Hi, everybody, and welcome to Module 2. This week, our topic is evaluating research questions and identifying key elements of research manuscripts. So as you can see from our main Module 2 page, which is here on my screen, we have 4 key learning objectives. And what I'm going to suggest, although the module learning materials are organized according to modalities, readings, then videos, I think it'll make the most sense to engage with them according to these learning objectives. So I'm going to suggest that you start by reading the book chapter, which is listed here, chapter 5. And what this chapter is essentially about is how to articulate research purpose statements, questions, and hypotheses. So remember that module 1 last week was about research problems. So the issue at hand, or the argument for why you're doing a study. Now, this week, we teach you how to state what that study will actually do. So I'll warn you kind of in advance, chapter 5 seems a little dense, but it's really important information, and you should definitely put a pin in it to return to when you're starting your LSC and beginning to think about your dissertation research questions and purpose themselves. Because really, even though this class is about reviewing the literature, we're not actually doing any studies yet. The purpose of your study should be really informed by not just your observations about an issue that's existing at Long Beach College, but also existing research related to your topic. So something I want to underscore is that the purpose of a study should not be a mystery. So when you're reading articles that are out there that have been published about studies, you should be able to identify the purpose of that study. It is a key element to that document. And you'd be shocked. So I peer review a lot of studies in for higher education journals, and many are submitted and they don't clearly state their purpose or the research questions. And or also shocking, even though it seems obvious, a study needs to answer its research question. You'd be surprised at how many studies I've peer reviewed for journals or conferences that don't clearly state their purpose or questions and don't actually collect data to answer them. And that's really what we have you do with your assignment this week. So this is a really, really critical topic. Also, I'll note, so chapter 5, it doesn't say it in the title here, but chapter 5 explains the difference between quantitative and qualitative study purposes and questions. So remember, quantitative studies use data that are numbers, basically, and qualitative studies use data that are words. So quant, kind of quantifiable, right? Numbers, and then qualitative, words. So typically the kind of question you answer with numbers is different from the kind you answer with words. And that's what chapter 5 explains. I'll also note that chapter 5 doesn't really get into mixed method studies, which use both qualitative and quantitative data, but those will frame their research questions kind of as a combination of both. Or they might have one question that's a quantitative question, one question that's a qualitative question, that kind of thing. And that also alludes to something that people often ask me: how many research questions should I have for my study? And unfortunately, there's no clear one answer. It just depends. I would say, though, that maybe 1 to 3 questions are typical in the higher ed literature. And you can also have sub-research questions. Like maybe your main question is, what's the effect of an orientation program on first-year students' persistence? And then maybe you'd have a sub-question like, how does the effect of an orientation program differ according to student socioeconomic background? So the main question maybe is kind of overall framing the impact of the program, and then you can have sub-questions maybe about demographics or the difference in its impact on different populations, that kind of thing. But really, it's going to be up to you as to how many questions you're going to ask in your study. I also want to make a note, as you'll see, chapter 5 does talk about hypotheses, research hypotheses. And those of you from hard science backgrounds are probably very familiar with testing hypotheses as part of research studies. So actually, though, most studies you'll find out, you'll see as you get into the literature more in higher ed, many don't propose separate hypotheses. They usually just state the purpose of the study and the research questions, which is fine. That's kind of just a norm in our field. So while it's great to know about how hypotheses are constructed, and they're part of quantitative studies, right? it's really not as big of a deal. So don't get fixated on, oh my gosh, I must have a hypothesis for my study, because that's not as common in the higher ed literature. So anyways, that's this first reading that we'd like you to do. Then I suggest you pop on over here and watch this first video here, which my colleague, Dr. Erin Rotherham Fuller, created. And so this video is really nice because it sort of gives you and foreshadows what you'll need to know in order to complete your assignment for the week. So then after you watch Erin's kind of short video, it's only 7 minutes, then I suggest you pop back over here to the readings and read the final article here, the Bus et al. Study. The idea behind this article actually is to give you an example to use for your assignment, but then also we use it kind of strategically to give you more background about your own EDD, because it's an action research study of our program that was done a couple of years ago. So as you read, especially focus on how they frame their research questions and their study purpose, which is essentially how it applies to what Erin talks about in her video. And I suggest to maybe before you read this article, you might want to check out the assignment instructions because that will help you to kind of think about how to read this article and what to pay attention to. But obviously you can go back to it when you need to do the assignment again. And then finally, after you do those readings, then finally, our last two objectives here for the module are about doing annotations and sort of starting to think about what you should pull out when you're summarizing studies. So the last two videos here are about how to do an annotated bibliography. And what I'm going to suggest for those, they're really just foreshadowing to what the literature grid assignment in Module 4 will require you to do. I want to underscore that as you're thinking about what to pull out from different studies, it's really important to pay attention to any study's limitations or weaknesses or sort of its flaws. So sometimes the authors will write about some of the weaknesses that they believe exist, but I really, really want you to keep in mind that you should be sort of reading research that's out there with a critical eye. Even though it's made it through peer review, no study is perfect. There are weaknesses to every single study. And it's also strategically important when you're thinking about what to pull out of different articles to summarize, paying attention to the gaps and weaknesses, because when you do a literature review to frame your own research, you're going to want to explain how your study is not just building on what others have done, but also contributing to those gaps or those limitations in what we know about the topic and what others have done to study it. So again, I'm going to suggest that you kind of bounce back and forth between those two. And then finally, as you can see from the email I'll send as well, your assignment is going to have you analyze the Bus et al. Article, and then also locate a peer-reviewed research article about any topic you'd like and analyze it as well. So some of you may already know how to do this, but for those who don't, I've created a short tutorial that demonstrates how to search educational databases on the ASU library site using keywords and the thesaurus. That video will be linked to in the announcement for this week, and then it's also under the media page right here, searching for peer-reviewed articles. Again, it's optional. Please do not feel that you have to read it. I don't know if it will be helpful or not, particularly some of those of you who have done a lot of lit reviews already, you don't probably need to watch it, but that's there. And next week, we're going to learn even more about how to sort of engage in the library, get into the literature. But I wanted to make sure you had the tools to at least be able to locate one peer-reviewed article to use for this week's assignment. And one final note I'll make about this week's assignment is, although you're posting it to the discussion board, your response to the discussion board, you do not need to respond to anyone else's posts. You can, obviously, but that's not part of how you'll be evaluated. So all you need to do is read through all these materials, watch all of these videos, and then provide your response to the assignment prompt on the discussion board. So that's a quick summary of what's probably going to take you a bit of time, but Again, as you know, at any point in time, please feel free to email myself or Dennis, or contact us through the Canvas email platform as well. And we are happy to set up a time to Zoom if you'd like to meet with us one-on-one. So I hope you all have a great week, and please let us know if you have any questions.